Chapter 53. The Clooney that emerged from the ragged tent in the meadow was far from being sick in the head. Members of the horde watched the way he strode purposefully about. The old glint was back in his single eye. His orders were crisp and consistent. Even the long tail had a fresh crack about it. The chief seemed sharper than he had been before. In the aftermath of the tunnel disaster, Clooney had called off the attack for a full day, withdrawing all his followers well back across the meadow. The warlord gave his horde time to recuperate from the Fascio, a whole day's leisure, with no recommendations and hardly any orders. The captains of Redwall wasted no time in making use of the temporary respite. Repairs were starting upon the gatehouse door. Teams of woodland carpenters, abbey smiths, and laborers, plus any creatures that felt the need, were lowered down to the road in large wicker work baskets. Should the enemy in the meadow decide to take any sudden move, the workmen would speedily be hauled back up to the ramparts. All that day, the rope gangs were kept busy sending down wood, spikes, cordage, tools, and repair materials. Clooney sat watching them from a distance as he talked, aloud to himself. "Good work, mice. Strengthen my gates. I want to rule a fortress with broken doors." Fangburn was passing. He overheard Clooney's conversation with himself. Not sure whether the remark were addressed to him, he stopped. Are you feeling all right, Chief?" "Never better," Clooney replied. He pointed to the repair crews. "See that, Fangburn? Honest, industrious work. And what for, eh?" Fangburn hazarded a guess. "To keep us out, Chief?" "No, to stop us getting in." Clooney chuckled. "Get some soldiers and light a fire down in the ditch. Make it a proper blaze, good and hot." Fangburn knew better than to question the reason for his chief's order, no matter how strange it sounded. "A big fire, right you are, Chief. I'll get them going right away." Fangburn hurried off, aware that Clooney was watching him. Shortly after, there was a huge fire burning in the ditch. The horde gathered around close by to see what Clooney was up to. The crackling flames gave off waves of heat, causing everyone to step back. Above the ditch, the air simmered and danced. Clooney stood in the ditch, claws and hips. He cracked his tail. "Scumnose, mange fur, bring those dormice prisoners." The 20 dormice were dragged forwards in a pitiable condition. They cowered on the ground in front of the warlord, half-starved and dull-eyed. Clooney pointed. "You, leader mouse, what's your name again?" "Plumpin, sir," the bed-ragged mouse replied. Clooney grabbed Plumpin roughly, dragging him away from his fellow captives on the ground. "What are these other miserable creatures to you, Plumpin?" The dormice explained in a shaky voice. "My family, sir. My mother, father, brothers, sisters, and my wife, and 2 little ones. Oh, please, sir, I spare them, I beg you." Clooney laughed cruelly. His eyes were devoid of pity. He leaned close to Plumpin and whispered harshly, "What would you do to save them?" The dormice watched Clooney's eyes rove lazily from his family to the blazing inferno. Anything you say." "What do you want me to do?" he screamed in fear and anxiety. Clooney cracked his tail triumphantly, pulling Plumpin forwards until their noses touched. The big rat's voice was as foul and evil as his breath. "Listen carefully. You are going to open the abbey door for me, my friend. If you fail, your precious little family will pay for the penalty. Now here's what you must do." Constance hauled up upon the rope. It was no hard task for a fully grown badger. On the other ropes there were creatures that could not compare with her strength, but they hauled and pulled with equally good will. Cornflower and Silent Sam kept busy supplying cool drinks and sweat cloths. The repair work went ahead at a steady pace. No one noticed that there was an extra mouse laboring among the workers in the roadway, Plumpin. Clooney had supplied him with a habit taken from the body of one who had fallen slain from the ramparts. Plumpin had concealed himself in a ditch, traveling under cover until he was level with the gatehouse. At an appropriate moment he slipped out with a plank upon his shoulder and joined the workforce. They toiled away industriously until Jess Squirrel, who was acting as an overseer, decided that the work was complete, and indeed it was. The old gatehouse door looked good as new. All the tools and spare timber was gathered up on the roadway, and the roadway was swept. Satisfied with the job well done, the work creatures slacked up their materials and hauled up to ramparts in the large grain baskets. Plumpin sat between Brother Alf and Brother Rufus. Across the meadow he could see Clooney, watching, always watching. Plumpin cursed the fate that had put him and his family in the hands of the rats. What a happy, friendly lot of Redwall creatures were. He was served afternoon tea, sitting on the grass in the cloisters. The dormice felt that the good food turned to ashes in his mouth as he thought of his betrayal of fellow mice. But there was no alternative. If he wanted to save his family, after tea he wandered off to the pretense of carrying out some fictitious task. When there was nobody about, he hid himself in the old gatehouse den, which had once been Methuselah's study. Locking the door, Plumpin lay down lonely and miserable to await nightfall. Inside Cavern Hole, the Father Abbot addressed a moral-boosting speech to his captains. Friends, it will not anvil Clooney little to put the abbey under a state of siege. As you know, Redwall is virtually self-supporting. All we require to sustain life is comfortable held within these walls. Therefore, I suggest we carry on as normally as possible. However, the walls must always be guarded. I leave it to you, my captains. Stay ever vigilant against Clooney and his horde. I know that with your counsel and good judgment, we will soon see the day when the enemy was forced to go elsewhere and leave Redwall in peace. There was a loud applause from the abbot's heartening words, but Constance was not convinced. She whispered her thoughts to Basil and Jess. Never. Clooney won't leave us until we're either we are dead or he is. Basil Staghair nodded in agreement. I know, old scout, but the abbot's such a decent old buffer that he believes there's good in everybody, even Clooney, what? And so do I, Jess muttered. I believe Clooney will be good someday. Good and dead. Gradually the day drew to a close. Lights dimmed as Redwall prepared for the well-deserved night's rest. The meadowland and woods grew quiet and peaceful. On the top of the wall, sentries leaned on the parapets, listening to the evening bird songs. Across the meadow, the enemy campfires burned low into the soft June night. Plumpin waited another hour as Clooney had instructed. Then it was time to make his move. Stealing quietly out of the gatehouse study, the dormice headed north, staying well within the deep shadows of the wall. A small north wall gate. Plumpin drew a scarlet cloth from his habit. Smearing the bolts with grease from the cloth, he silently worked them loose. Kilkenny lay watching the gate from behind a sycamore in the woods. Near to every other entrance, one of Clooney's most trusted soldiers was concealed, awaiting the signal. It was the ferret who was rewarded by the sight of the scarlet cloth being shoved through the door jamb. He hurried away to tell Clooney. It was the dead of night when Clooney's horde moved out to the meadow. Across the embers of each campfire, bundled grass and twigs had been wrapped in blankets. To no unsuspecting sentries on the wall, the bundles looked like sleeping forms. They sensed nothing amiss. The horde circled northwards, were far enough from Redwall to escape detection. He crossed the road at the head of his army. They filtered back through the leafy cover of nighttime mossflower towards the abbey. Now that his goal was in sight, Clooney used all the stealth of a stalking hunter, waiting until the entire horde was in position. Each soldier crouched quietly among the fern and bushes, and knew the penalty for making any sound that would betray their presence. Not death from the defenders, but death at the claws of their own chieftain. Clooney would wait. He gave another half-hour until he could actually see some of the guards on top of the wall nodding off at their posts. What was 30 minutes after he had waited so long for this moment? While practicing skill, he slid from his hiding place and crossed to the wall door. One gentle push, and the small iron door swung open slowly on its greased hinges. Clooney stood in the doorway as his soldiers filed past him on the way to the abbey buildings. There was little need to worry about the wall guards. Those who were awake would be watching the road or the enemy camp, their backs turned to the secret invaders. Plumpin stood by, anxiously watching the warlord. At least his family would be safe now. The dormice had faithfully carried out his part of the dreadful stream. Clooney must surely keep to his word. He did not see the look that passed between Clooney and Fangburn. Fangburn swung the heavy club and brought it crashing down between the back of Clooney's head from behind. The unlucky dormice crumpled to the ground without a sound. Clooney the Scourge bared fangets and grinned wickedly into the dark. He had finally brought his horde into Redwall.